I'm an animal control expert who specializes in cryptids. My first cryptid encounter. Part 2 of 2 by Redditor Merbeefthis. A few days ago, I posted a PSA on this website about what to do if you encounter a hide-behind in your local area. Well, a few hours after that I checked my inbox and I had about 1 million questions from 250,000 people. What kind of van do you drive? 2003 Dodge Sprinter van with Ratman spray painted on the side. Will my body wash attract a succubus? No, but they are intensely attracted to frustrated virgins, so you may or may not have a problem there. Can I come along on one of your jobs? Absolutely not. I barely make it out alive myself half the time. But the most common question I received was, how'd you get your start in the business? Now, I'm a busy man. Like I said in my last post, Halloween is right around the corner and this is my peak season. Unless y'all want your toddler wandering up to a house where half of the Halloween decorations ain't actually Halloween decorations, well, then you got to let me work. So in lieu of answering how'd you get your start in the biz, to all y'all individually, I'll post the story of my first job here to nip any further asking of that question in the bud. In the year 2000 I was 22 years old and just starting out my life in the biz, as y'all have been putting it. Pulling snakes out of toilets and charging down skunks using a trash can lid as a shield against its spray. I loved the job. Wasn't any different than what I did as a kid growing up in Middle Georgia, only now I was getting paid for it. Money wasn't great, but small town living is cheap and it kept a roof over my head and food on the table. Over time and through word of mouth my little business grew until I was the premier rat man in Taliaferro County. Granted, the county population was less than 2K, so business wasn't exactly booming, but hey, I'm proud of it. One day, I'm in my truck in a Taco Bell drive-thru and I got a call on my cell. Unknown number. I answered, Taliaferro Rat Man. You need something? The voice on the other end was frantic, screaming about something stuck in his mudroom, but wouldn't give specifics. I could tell from the man's accent and his clear discomfort in the idea of an animal being in his house that he was city folk. You know, a real-life Atlanta dandy. Some of those city folk had second homes on the nearby Lakes Oconee and Clarks Hill, but I was shocked when he told me his home was in Union County, nearly 130 miles away. I asked him how he got my number and he told me that he had found one of my business cards on his kitchen table. I told him I would be there in 3 hours and hung up. Now here's the fishy part, I didn't have any business cards. I still don't, but I still get calls. Sometimes people call me saying they found my card on the kitchen table, or in their pocket, or slipped under the windshield wiper of their car. One lady about 10 years ago said she got out of the shower and my phone number was written right there on the fogged-up bathroom mirror. That woman straight up thought I was the devil until I got that family of Pukwudgies out of her basement, got them jealous by talking loudly on the phone about how much nicer and more expansive a nearby cave system was than this horrible basement. After that, she thought I could walk on water. Truth is, I don't know what is pushing business my way. I don't know why I was chosen to do the work I do, but that's the fact of the matter, I was chosen for it. Well, anywho, back to my first job. I pulled up the client's house, or I guess the better word for it would be compound. The property was completely surrounded by a 7-foot security fence that contained the main house, a small chicken run, a sauna, and a handful of small windowless buildings that dotted the forested property. After speaking to the owner via intercom, he remotely opened the gate and greeted me as I pulled up the driveway of the main house. He was a wiry, rat-faced, dead-eyed man who looked and smelled like he hadn't showered in days, maybe weeks. His greasy hair clung to a greasier forehead as he reached his open hand towards me. Hello, we spoke on the phone. My name is Dave, his accent betraying him as a foreigner in these parts. Elmer, I replied, not from around here, Dave? Oh, Dave's face dropped as if he was upset that he had been so easily discovered as an outsider. Oh no, not from the south. This is a vacation house for the family and I. The winters down here are mild compared to up north. I couldn't believe this guy had a wife smelling like he did. Where's the family? I'm down here doing some maintenance just for the week. The whole family won't be down here for another 2 months or so. Alright, well, what's the problem? Dave stepped close to me. I mean really close, like Eskimo kisses close, and asked me, "You deal with this stuff often?" Huh. Your card makes it seem so. Thankfully he took a step back. Honestly, I'm not even sure where I got this card in the first place. You, got that card on you, Dave? Here he handed the card over to me. It was a plain white business card with black text that read, Elmer Ratman Boggs, Animal Control and Cryptid Specialist. His prices are unbelievable. The back of the card had a little picture of a ghost along with my phone number. It's at this point I should tell you, these cards are different every time. I still don't know where they come from and I've stopped caring. Each one has some stupid pun on it. He's got the spirit. Half price on April Fool's Day. I've seen one that had a picture of me wearing a French maid's outfit with the words "plagued by paranormal entities." Call Elmer splashed across it. I do not like that one and I have no idea where that picture came from, so don't ask. Yeah, I deal with these kinds of things all the time, I said. Now show me where the critter's at. Dave led me down the hill on which the main house stood and out to one of the smaller buildings that punctuated the tree line. It's in here, Dave said as we approached a small shed about 10 feet by 10 feet. A large padlock held the door in place. I thought you said it was in your mudroom, I asked. Yes, well I was panicked on the phone I supposed, Dave explained. As you can see, we keep chickens here and when the boys are here we like to go hunting. This is where we clean and butcher our animals. Good enough explanation for me. Open it up. Dave opened it up and practically ran back towards the main house as I stepped into the room. It was all white. Painted cinder block walls, fluorescent lights, laminate flooring with a drain in the middle of the room, a large hook hung from the ceiling to hang a deer carcass. There was a countertop with a sink and a few drawers, probably knives in there, a wall-mounted security camera. I'd like to know more about that. But what really demanded my attention was floating on air in the top corner of the room facing the wall. It was a human head. I couldn't believe it. Nowadays this is an average Wednesday, but imagine you're in my position. Your neighbor calls you over to help get a raccoon out of the attic, then you get there and he's all, "Oh wait, never mind. It's a decapitated human head." Oh yeah, and it flies around like a helium balloon. That's right folks. A floater on my first day. A real trial by fire. I didn't panic. Not sure how, but I didn't. I took a step back slowly, but apparently not slow enough as I watched the head turn to face me. It was a woman's head. Long black hair. Eyes gouged out. Black dried blood caked all over and it had a tail, a few inches of spinal column sticking out the bottom. I stepped out of the shed and slammed the door before it did anything else. Dave called to me. I turned to see his smelly ass calling from an upstairs window of the main house. Fucker was just gonna leave me to die out here. Can you get rid of it? Oh yeah buddy, I can do that. I was talking out my ass, but we need to talk. I told Dave I could get it out, but it would be expensive. Very expensive. I also told him I would need time. A few days. I made up some bullshit about rituals and waiting for the correct phase of the moon, but, in reality, I had no idea what I was going to do and I just needed enough time to look around on the internet to figure out what the hell I was dealing with and how it should be handled. I told him I'd have to go home to get things ready, but I'd be back in a few days to fix his floating head problem. He made a counteroffer. He'd give me a cash advance right now to go into town and gather all the necessary supplies for rituals and the cleansings, and I could stay the night on the property so I wouldn't have to drive the 3 hours home. He'd also give an additional bonus if I could have the cursed noggin removed within the next 24 hours. I asked him if he had internet access. He did. I accepted. I could kill 40,000 rats and still not make the money I was going to make in the next 24 hours if I could pull this off. I took the extremely generous cash advance and zipped out of compound to buy my supplies. I drove the 40 minutes south to Dahlonega, an old gold mining town, and found an electronics store where I bought a laptop computer and mouse. That's all I really needed, but I couldn't go back empty-handed when I'd promised an elaborate ritual, so I popped into a few of the novelty gold mine stores and bought some fool's gold. A few pretty rocks, a nice hat and a peacock feather. Then I headed back to the compound. I spent the entire drive back pinching myself, wondering if I had finally lost my marbles, questioning my faith, replaying every single episode of X-Files over and over in my head. I decided it didn't matter if I was crazy or not, either way, it was happening. I got back to the compound, parked the car, brought my newly bought equipment up to the room I would using on the second floor of the main house, then asked Dave for the key to shed. I wanted one more look at the head. I slowly opened the shed door and peeked inside. The head was still floating in the top corner of the room facing the wall. I stood for a while watching it. It slowly bobbed up and down as if floating in water. I watched what little of the neck was left vibrate as gentle moans emanated from it. I cleared my throat. The head slowly turned towards me. Its expression didn't change. It didn't lose any elevation either. It seemingly wasn't interested in me at all. I took a quarter out of my pocket and tossed it up towards the head where it plinked off its cheek and bounced down to the floor below. The head remained neutral. This thing didn't give a shit about me. Might as well have called it my dad. I left the shed, locked the door behind me and headed up to my room to do some research. This was the hardest part when I started this gig. How do you tell the difference between a gnome and a leprechaun? A fairy and an elf? A wendigo and a skinwalker? What happens if you get it wrong? I'll tell you what happens: you get hurt or you die. 6 years ago, I made the mistake of misidentifying a band of Namirigar as Rocky Mountain Hill dwarves, and I lost 2 fingers and bite-sized chunk of my ass. I've learned my lesson the hard way. Research, research, research. It's the name of the game. And this was a tough case to start with. Floating heads appear all over Native American folklore, especially in the Iroquois and Wyandot histories, but their heads were different. For one, they had wings and talons. The one I was dealing with floated. They're also like 6 feet tall, and this one was just your regular-sized everyday disembodied head that just so happened to take flight. There is also the behavior. The Iroquois version of the head just kinda flew around and terrorized anyone who was unlucky to have stumbled across it. While the Mohawk histories say it's out for revenge against those who gave it an undignified death. But the big problem with oral histories is that they change. One day someone can't remember something, so they throw their own wrinkle in there. It's like a centuries-long game of telephone that started with Jessica has great hair and ends with death metal head eats babies. At least this head didn't seem to mind my company. It wanted whatever was in the direction of that top corner of the shed it was entombed in, and I just couldn't for the life of me figure out what that was. I had a hunch, but nothing solid yet. I looked at the clock and realized it was nearly midnight. Opened my door to head to the bathroom to piss and wash my face before bed, and ran directly into Dave, who had seemingly been standing right outside my bedroom door. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Yes sir, big day. Will you get it done? Does the Pope wear a funny hat?" Amusing, he didn't smile. "I'm fixing to wash my face before bed and we'll be out there bright and early tomorrow morning." "We'll?" Dave didn't seem happy to be included in that last sentence. "Yes sir, I'll need your help with this ritual," I said back to him, "2-man job." "This isn't what I'm paying you for," he sneered. "Don't worry, you won't have to do nothing, just need you in the room." I was talking out my ass again. "Nothing too big, just need you holding a peacock feather is all." Humph. He exhaled from his nose sharply and stared at me with his dead black eyes for a few seconds before marching off. "Good night." I was washing my face in the bathroom and realized I never picked up an extra toothbrush when I was in town. Now, I don't know about where you're from, but people I know always have an extra toothbrush laying around. Especially people with families like Dave said he had, so I did a little light snooping through the drawers in the bathroom, and you know what I found? It wasn't a toothbrush. It was a loose panel on base of the bathroom counter. I quietly pulled it back and found stuffed inside a hammer and a plastic bag. I opened the plastic bag and dumped the contents into my hand. Driver's licenses. A dozen of them at least. All women. I fingered through them quickly, looking at the pictures, names and dates, when one of them caught my eye. Misty O'Connor. I recognized her immediately because you never forget the face of the first flying decapitated head you see. You just don't. I don't make the rules. This fucking guy, Dave. My hunch was right. The cameras. The multiple deer cleaning shacks. The 7-foot security wall to protect you from what, Dave? The extremely high turkey population of Union County? No way, Jose. I knew what I was going to do. The next morning, Dave unlocked the shack and held it shut while I gave him instructions. He was going to stand off to the right side of the shed while I went into the room and tied a blindfold around the head. Once the head was blind, I would signal him to come in and he would place the peacock feather in the head's mouth. Then, I told him the head would disintegrate in a fireball and he could pay me the rest of my money. It was all bullshit, of course, but if brains was made of leather, old Davey could hardly saddle a June bug. I took over holding the door from Dave and motioned for him to walk off to the right side of the shed. I felt the pressure on the other side of the door relax as the head floated to the right, following its sense of where Dave was. I entered the shed and found the head floating at chest height, gnashing its teeth at the wall that protected Dave. "Hey Misty, SHHHH, it's okay," I told the head in the same voice I use for dogs and cats and sometimes lizards. "I'm on your side. We're gonna get this, sonny bitch." I looped a piece of cloth around the head covering the empty sockets where the eyes used to be and held the two loose ends in my hand like a leash. The head pulled gently, as if agreeing to my unspoken plan. My other hand held the piece of fool's gold for literally no reason other than convincing shit for brains. Dave, my plan totally legit. "Aight now, Davey, come on in," I shouted towards the open door. The head of Misty O'Connor pulled leash gently, following the path Dave took as he walked the perimeter of the building. Dave then appeared in the doorway looking like a total idiot by holding out his peacock feather towards the head like a priest would hold crucifix towards a vampire. "So, all I have to do is put the feather in its mouth?" Dave asked, his voice cracking and clearly terrified. I fake strained and sucked in a few short breaths, pretending to be fighting for my life, holding back this monster. "Just do it already. I can't hold it for much longer." Dave shrieked as he shoved the peacock feather into Misty's mouth. The head slowly pulled the feather in with its lips and teeth and gave a few over-exaggerated cow-like chews before swallowing. The mangled feather dropped from the open neck at the bottom of the head and landed on the floor with a wet plop. I stopped straining and started to relax. "It's working. It's losing energy," I shouted at Dave in fake exhilaration. "So that's it?" Dave asked, catching his breath. "We killed this bitch?" The head tugged on its leash a little harder at that last word. "We got her," I said back. "Then I don't need you anymore," Dave said as in one fluid motion he pulled a knife out from behind his back and lunged at me. Everything went according to plan. I released the blindfold leash and Misty was on Dave like a pit bull on a preschooler. First, she bit his knife-wielding hand off at the wrist, then in his split second of confusion that followed she bit a sizable chunk out of his neck. Dave collapsed in a bloody heap on the floor, trying to bat his one-time victim with his remaining hand, but she was far too quick for him. By the time he tried to swat her, she was already on the other side of his body biting off another chunk. Eventually he stopped fighting, and that's when it got really gruesome. He lay on the floor of his kill room, crying and begging for mercy like so many women had done before, and just like those women, he wouldn't get any. I looked away, but the horrible sound of breaking bone made me look back. Misty's jaw was unhinging, breaking, expanding, then like a boa constrictor she began the tedious process of slowly, almost tenderly swallowing him whole. She started at the feet, which were easy enough, but around the thighs she began to flick her chin forward and tilt her head back to help the fresh meat go down. Less snake-like and more Komodo dragon-like. Dave screamed the entire time. The last thing to go was one of Dave's outstretched arms, which she greedily slurped up like noodle. I'm not going to lie, once she finished it was awkward. We both just kind of looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. Eventually I had to break the silence, it just felt too weird, so I said, "Hi, Misty." Then I immediately felt like an idiot for saying something so stupid. What am I? 5? After another few seconds Misty erupted into a small fireball and completely vanished. Turns out I was actually right about that part. Felt good to be right. I phoned the police and answered their questions when they showed. Told them I was here for an appointment and noticed some weird shit. They searched the property and that was that. They found 2 other girls, one of them was still alive. Of course, they think Dave is on the run, but it at least gave some families some closure. Then I walked back to my truck, upset about not getting paid more than the advance which I had already spent, when I felt a weight in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out an envelope of cash. That's how it works. A lot like the business cards. I have no idea how, it just shows up and I don't ask questions. I hope this has answered some of your questions. Maybe after Halloween I can answer a few more for y'all, or maybe I could tell you about the 2 years I spent traveling. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my stories, and if you ever need me, you already have my card.